Soul didn't whisper when it judged a woman. It shouted. Aaliyah Harris heard the word before she even walked into the room. Gold digger. Someone said it loud enough on purpose, right as she stepped through the door on the arm of the most feared man in the city. Park Ji-ho, the Korean mafia boss who could end a man's career with one phone call, and here he was, letting people believe his girlfriend was only after his empire. She kept her chin up. She always did. Nobody in that ballroom knew the truth. They didn't know she'd turned down a house. They didn't know she'd said no to money more times than most people ever get offered at once. All they saw was a black woman standing next to Korean wealth and power, and they decided that story for themselves before she ever opened her mouth. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. 3 weeks earlier, it had started with an apartment. Ji-ho had bought it without asking her. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the Han River, furniture picked out by someone who charged more for taste than most people made in a year. He thought it was a gift. She thought it was a trap. "I can't take this," Aaliyah said, standing in the doorway like she wasn't sure she wanted to be inside it at all. Ji-ho frowned. He wasn't used to people saying no to him. Not employees, not enemies, not women. "It's already paid for." That's exactly the problem. She crossed her arms, not out of anger, more like she was holding herself together. "You know what people already say about me. If I move in here, I'm not just his girlfriend anymore. I'm the woman who took the apartment. I become proof. I hand them the story they already want to tell. So you'd rather struggle. I'd rather struggle honestly than live somewhere people can point to and say, 'See, we told you.'" He didn't understand, or maybe he understood too well and didn't like what it meant. Ji-ho had spent his whole life keeping the people he cared about safe by controlling everything around them. Money solved problems. Power silenced doubt. But Aaliyah didn't want to be solved. She wanted to be believed, and that wasn't something he could buy for her, no matter how much he had. So he did what he always did when something scared him. He went cold. "Do what you want," he said, and walked away first, like leaving before she could, was somehow still winning. 2 days later, Aaliyah packed her bags and left his residence. She went back to the small design studio job she'd put on hold since they'd gotten serious. The one that paid her enough to survive, but not enough to matter to anyone watching her bank account. Ji-ho didn't call. He didn't send anyone to stop her either. He told himself that was strength. It felt more like losing. The elite gathering came a week after that. A charity dinner tied to one of Ji-ho's legitimate companies. The kind of event where everyone smiled with their teeth and meant none of it. Aaliyah came back for it because Ji-ho asked her to, quietly, almost like he wasn't sure he had the right to anymore. That's where it happened. An older man, one of Ji-ho's business associates, raised his glass a little too high and said it loud enough for the tables near them to hear. He hoped she wasn't in a hurry for Ji-ho's health to fail. Wouldn't want her waiting too long for what she's really after, he said, and laughed like it was nothing. The room went quiet in that specific way. Rooms go quiet when everyone wants to see what happens next. Aaliyah didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She set her glass down slow and looked at the man like she was studying something small and unimportant. "I'm curious," she said. "What about my bank account gives you the right to know my character?" Nobody answered. Ji-ho watched from across the table, his jaw tight, every instinct in him ready to destroy the man where he stood. That's what he was built for. That's what he'd always done for people he cared about. Instead, he leaned toward her. "Tell me what you want me to do." Aaliyah didn't hesitate. "Nothing. For once, let me speak for myself." That answer did something to him. He'd spent years thinking protection meant stepping in front of people. She'd just shown him it sometimes meant stepping back. Later that night, alone in his office, Ji-ho pulled old financial records he hadn't looked at in months. Buried in them was a transfer he'd authorized to Aaliyah's account almost a year ago. Quiet, no strings, no explanation needed. She'd never touched it. She'd never even mentioned it. She rejected money nobody even knew she'd been offered. He sat with that for a long time. The next evening, he found her at the studio, waiting outside like he wasn't sure he was allowed in. "I know you didn't want my money," he said. "I believe that now." She almost smiled, almost let herself feel relieved. Then his face changed. There's something worse than people thinking you're a gold digger. What's worse than that? Someone inside my organization wants everyone to keep believing it. Aaliyah felt the floor of her understanding shift under her. Jiho reached into his jacket and placed a folder on the small table between them. Inside were names she recognized, people who'd smiled at her while whispering behind her back, all of them connected by money, moving through the same hidden accounts. "I want to put something in your name," he said. "Another apartment I can't accept?" "No." His eyes didn't move from hers. "A controlling share in one of my most valuable companies." Aaliyah stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "Why would you give an accused gold digger control of your empire?" Jiho didn't blink. "Because I need to know who comes after you," he said, "when they think you finally have something worth taking." Aaliyah didn't answer right away. She looked at the folder, then at him, then back at the folder, like she was trying to find the trick hidden somewhere between the pages. "A controlling share," she said slowly. "You understand what that does to me. Right now, I'm just the woman they accuse of wanting your money. The day my name is on that paperwork, I become the woman who got it." "I know." "Then why?" "Because I'd rather you have real power than a reputation you can't defend." Jiho's voice was steady, but his hands weren't. He kept them folded on the table like that would stop anyone from noticing. "If someone wants to come after you, let them come after someone who can actually fight back." She sat with that for a long moment. Then she pulled the folder toward her, not as acceptance, just as a woman who needed to see the truth before she agreed to carry it. "If I do this," she said, "it's not a gift, it's a job. I want independent access to the financial records, not filtered through your people. You don't get to pull my authority just because you don't like a decision I make. And I won't touch a single one of company money for myself. Not one dinner, not one dress, nothing anyone could point to later." Jiho almost smiled. Almost. "Anything else?" "Yeah." She met his eyes and didn't look away. "If you want a partner, you treat me like one. Not someone you're protecting, not someone you're testing, a partner." He didn't answer with words. He reached across the table and slid the folder back toward her, along with a second envelope she hadn't noticed until now, the paperwork already drawn up like he'd known she'd say yes before she did. Giving up that kind of control cost him something he didn't have a name for yet. His whole life, power had been the one thing nobody could take from him unless they killed him first. Now he was handing a piece of it over willingly, to a woman the world had already decided couldn't be trusted with it. For Aaliyah, the cost was different. She wasn't afraid of failing. She was afraid of what it would mean if she succeeded, and everyone still called it exactly what they'd always called it. 3 weeks into the position, she found it. Buried inside the international accounts of Jiho's shipping subsidiary, money was moving in a pattern that looked clean on the surface and wrong underneath it, routed through 2 charitable foundations and 1 investment fund that didn't seem to invest in anything real. Nothing was stolen outright. It was worse than that. It was patient. She brought it to the senior executives first, the way she was supposed to. "With respect," one of them said, not sounding respectful at all. "You've been in this role for 3 weeks. These men have run international accounts for 15 years. Then explain the pattern to me," Aaliyah said, "because either I'm wrong or 15 years of experience missed something a newcomer caught in 3 weeks." Nobody explained it. So she froze the accounts herself, using the authority that was legally hers on paper, whether the room liked it or not. By evening, the freeze had triggered a liquidity crisis in 2 ongoing shipments, and a partner company was threatening to pull out of a deal worth more than Aaliyah wanted to think about. Jiho found out from someone else before she had the chance to tell him herself, and by the time he walked into her office, his calm was already gone. "You froze accounts that affect 3 active contracts without telling me first. I tried to raise it through the proper channel. Your people laughed at me, so you went around them. I used the authority you gave me." Her voice rose to match his. "Or was that authority only real as long as I never actually used it? That's not what this is, isn't it?" She stepped closer, refusing to shrink the way the room probably expected her to. "You handed me power in front of everyone, And the first time I use it, without asking your permission, you show up acting like I borrowed something that was never really mine. Jiho's jaw tightened. You wanted to prove you belong here. The words landed somewhere deep and old in her. A place built from every room she'd ever walked into, where people decided who she was before she spoke a word. You, she said quietly, are the reason I feel like I have to prove anything at all. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Somewhere underneath his anger, Jiho understood she wasn't entirely wrong, and that understanding scared him more than the financial crisis did. His trust had conditions he hadn't even admitted to himself. Aaliyah understood something too, standing there in an office that legally belonged to her now. She was becoming powerful enough that he couldn't simply decide things for her anymore, and some part of him didn't know what to do with a woman he couldn't fully control. It was Jiho's head of security who found the second layer 2 days later while trying to trace where the suspicious accounts had originated. The transactions had started almost immediately after Jiho and Aaliyah went public. Not months before. Not years before. Right after. And the deeper his people dug, the worse it got. Someone had built the entire trail to look exactly like Aaliyah herself had been the one quietly moving money through his organization. Small deposits, careful timing, everything designed to survive a closer look. Jiho called her into his office that night. He didn't raise his voice this time. He didn't need to. He simply placed the new documents in front of her, and for the first time since she'd known him, he didn't look angry at all. He looked like a man watching something break that he wasn't sure he could fix. Aaliyah scanned the pages, and her stomach dropped somewhere she couldn't reach. The documents referenced conversations, private ones, the kind that had only ever happened between the two of them behind closed doors. Jiho, her voice came out smaller than she wanted it to. Nobody else knew we talked about this. He looked at her for a long, quiet moment, like he was hoping she'd say something that would make the next sentence unnecessary. There are only 3 people who could have known this, he said. Then he said her name. Jiho saying her name didn't feel like an accusation. It felt worse, like he was naming a possibility he hated even having to consider. You're one of 3 people who had access to those conversations, he said quietly. That doesn't mean I think you did this. Doesn't it? Aaliyah set the documents down slow, careful, like they might burn her if she held them too long. You just told me my own name in a sentence about who could be guilty. I said the facts. You said my name. Neither of them moved for a moment. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of every question they were both too afraid to ask out loud. 2 days later, without telling her first, Jiho quietly restricted her access to the company's most sensitive accounts. He told himself it was protection, a way to keep her outside the blast radius while his people found the real leak. He didn't tell himself the other truth, that some small, scared part of him needed to know she couldn't touch those accounts even if she wanted to. Aaliyah found out from a junior analyst who assumed she already knew. She didn't go to Jiho's office to argue. 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 My resignation. Her voice was calm in a way that scared him more than anger would have. You gave me a job with conditions. One of them was that you couldn't pull my authority just because you didn't like something. You just did it anyway, without even telling me. I was protecting you. You were controlling me. She said it without cruelty, just fact, laid out plain like the documents he'd shown her days ago. There's a difference, Jiho, and I think somewhere inside you, you already know it. He let her walk out. He told himself later that letting her go was strength, the same lie he'd told himself weeks earlier when she first left his residence. This time, the lie didn't hold. This time, something in his chest told him he'd just made the worst decision of his life, and he wouldn't understand how bad until much later. Aaliyah didn't disappear quietly. She took the copies of the financial records she'd legally pulled during her time in the position, records that were still hers to keep, and brought them to a woman named Seraphine Okafor, a compliance specialist known across 3 continents for finding fraud that experienced auditors missed for years. Seraphine studied the pages for a long time before she looked up. "This wasn't built to steal money," she said. "Not really. Look at the pattern. Every single transaction is designed so the trail leads back to one person. Me. You." Seraphine tapped the page. "Whoever built this wanted it to look like you were the threat from the very beginning. That's not sloppy. That's patient. Before we go further, I'd love to know where you're watching this from. Drop your city or country in the comments, because what Aaliyah is about to uncover changes everything." At that exact moment, across the city, Ji-ho was learning something that would twist the knife even deeper. His head of security came to him with a name he hadn't expected, a mid-level associate with access to his private schedule and his personal habits, someone who would have known exactly when Ji-ho and Aaliyah spoke behind closed doors. Ji-ho felt something cold settle in his chest. The leak hadn't come from a stranger. It had come from someone close enough to know things only a handful of people should have known. He thought of Aaliyah's face when he'd said her name in that sentence. He thought about how quickly he'd let her walk out the door. Aaliyah believed, in the quiet hours of that week, that she finally had proof of what she'd always feared. When trust became inconvenient, Ji-ho's power came first. Every time, no matter what he said in soft moments behind closed doors. She told herself she was better off standing on her own than waiting for a man to choose her over his empire. Ji-ho believed something just as wrong. He told himself her resignation meant she'd chosen independence over him, that she'd rather investigate alone than stay and let him protect her the only way he knew how. Neither of them said it out loud, but both were doing the same thing. Both were protecting themselves from the possibility that the other might actually walk away for good. It was Seraphine who found the thread that unraveled everything. "This isn't about stealing from Ji-ho," she said, 3 days later, spreading a new set of documents across the table. "Look at the structure. Every transaction, every account, every accusation against you. It's all pointing toward one outcome. Someone wants Ji-ho to hand control of his empire to a specific person. You were never the target, Aaliyah. You were the excuse." Aaliyah sat with that for a long moment, the weight of it settling slow. She hadn't been hunted because anyone actually believed she was a threat. She'd been hunted because her reputation made her the perfect scapegoat. An easy story the whole city was already willing to believe. Then Seraphine slid one final page across the table, the original authorization document, the one that started the entire trail. Aaliyah's stomach turned to stone. At the bottom, in ink she recognized from every contract she'd ever watched him sign, was Ji-ho's own signature. Nobody had forged it. Nobody needed to. He'd signed it himself. She didn't call ahead. She drove straight to his office, the document clutched in her hand, ready to demand an explanation for a betrayal she couldn't yet fully name. But when she walked in, Ji-ho was already standing, already waiting, already looking at her like he'd known this moment was coming for a long time. "I know what you found," he said, before she could speak a single word. Aaliyah froze. "I signed it," Ji-ho said quietly, "because I was trying to protect you." The document trembled in her hand. This wasn't a stranger's betrayal or an enemy's manipulation. This was Ji-ho, making decisions about her life, her name, her future, without ever once telling her he was doing it. "Protecting me from what?" Aaliyah said. "The truth?" Ji-ho didn't sit down. He stood there like a man confessing to something he'd rehearsed and still couldn't get right. "Months ago, before you and I were even public, I found out a rival organization was moving against me. Slow, patient, building a financial takeover from the inside, the kind that doesn't need guns or threats, just paperwork and time. What does that have to do with a signature that puts my name on your empire? I thought the easiest way to protect you was to make you look financially separate from me. Untouchable. If anything happened to me, if I disappeared or got pushed out, I wanted a structure already built that would put everything in your name before anyone else could take it." Aaliyah felt the room tilt, just slightly. "You built a plan for my entire future, and never told me it existed. I thought I was giving you freedom. You gave me responsibility." Her voice cracked on the word, not from weakness, from the exact opposite. "You gave me a weight to carry, and never told me I was carrying it. Do you understand what that means? Every account I froze, every accusation I stood in a room and defended myself against, all of it happened inside a trap you built with good intentions and terrible judgment." Jiho had no defense for that, because there wasn't one. "I understand why you did it," Aaliyah said quietly. "That's the part that makes this so much harder. I understand the fear underneath it. I just can't forgive the method. Being protected from the truth is still being controlled, Jiho. It just wears a kinder face." 3 days later, Seraphine called with a voice that didn't sound like her usual calm. "I found him," she said. "The person behind all of it." "Who?" "Du-Yun Baek." Aaliyah felt the name settle wrong in her chest. Jiho's strategist. The man who'd helped him build half his empire. The one who sat in every private meeting. Who understood Jiho's instincts better than almost anyone alive. When Jiho heard the name, something in his face went still in a way Aaliyah had never seen. "Baek has known me since before I had anything worth protecting," he said. "He knows how I think before I think it." That was exactly the problem. Baek hadn't needed to steal the company outright. He'd studied Jiho for years, and found the one flaw strong enough to break everything from the inside, his belief that loving someone meant controlling every risk around them. Baek had simply given that flaw enough rope to isolate Aaliyah all on its own. The gold digger narrative wasn't an accident either. It was the perfect weapon, because every move made against her looked justified to a world already primed to believe the worst. Jiho sat with that realization like it physically hurt. He hadn't just failed to stop the conspiracy. He'd built the conditions that let it work. Aaliyah watched him absorb it, and something complicated moved through her, anger still sitting beside something gentler she wasn't ready to name. He'd hurt her, but he hadn't been the architect of her humiliation, only a man whose fear had made him an easy tool for someone smarter and colder. She didn't know yet whether understanding his fear meant she owed him forgiveness. Before that question could settle, Jiho asked her a different one. "What do you want to do about the arrangement?" Because there it was, sitting quietly underneath everything else. The structure he'd built months ago was still active, still legal, still capable of transferring full ownership of his empire into Aaliyah's name with one final signature. The woman the entire city once called a gold digger now held the exact thing that could decide whether Park Jiho kept his empire or lost it completely. "I could take it," she said slowly, almost testing how the words felt in her mouth. "Everything you own, legally mine, and every person who ever called me a gold digger would finally have the proof they always wanted. Aaliyah, I won't do it." She said it clean, without hesitation, the decision already made somewhere deep inside her long before this moment. "I'm not accepting an empire just because you think it proves how much you love me. That's not love, Jiho. That's you trying to fix this, the only way you know how, with money and control, dressed up as devotion." Jiho looked at her for a long moment, and something in his face finally shifted, like a door opening onto a room he'd never let himself enter. He understood, maybe for the first time, what the real choice actually was. He could give her everything he owned, or he could give her something far harder to hand over. A choice that was entirely hers. He sat down at his desk without another word and began drawing up new paperwork, his pen moving with the same steady hand that had signed away her freedom months earlier without telling her. This time she watched every word. The document dissolved the structure completely. No more silent arrangement. No more empire waiting in her name without her consent. He slid it across the desk toward her. "If you walk away after this," he said quietly, "I won't stop you." Aaliyah picked up the page, scanning it slow, half expecting some hidden clause, some quiet trap folded into the language the way everything else in his world seemed to be. But there was a second page attached beneath it, one she hadn't been told about. A transfer of legitimate assets, enough that she would never suffer financially for anything that had happened to her, none of it tied to the empire, none of it capable of being used as evidence against her character ever again. She looked up at him, confused in a way that made her chest ache. Why? Ji-ho met her eyes, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked like a man with nothing left to control. Because this time, he said, I want to help you without buying your decision. Aaliyah stood there holding 2 pages that gave her something she'd never actually had in this entire relationship. Complete freedom. No empire waiting for her. No accusation she needed to disprove. No man deciding her future behind her back. Just a choice. And for the first time since the night this all began, the hardest question left in the room wasn't about money, or trust, or the empire he'd built. It was whether she still wanted him. Aaliyah set both pages down on the desk between them. I don't want it, she said. Any of it. Ji-ho didn't move. He didn't reach for the papers or ask her to reconsider. He just watched her, waiting. The way a man waits when he has finally learned that some things cannot be negotiated. I'm not refusing it to prove I never wanted your money, she said. I stopped needing to prove that a long time ago. I'm refusing it because I don't want to spend my whole life being the woman who finally got the empire. I want to spend it being the woman who built something of her own. Then that's what you'll do. No offer, no counter, no new documents sliding across the desk. Just those 4 words, plain and steady. The first time in this entire relationship he'd let a decision of hers stand without trying to soften it, fix it, or wrap it in something he controlled. That's it, she said, almost testing him. No apartment, no new account, no empire hidden in fine print. That's it, his voice was quiet. I just want to know if you want me in your life. The question sat in the room between them, small and enormous at once. The following weeks moved fast. Aaliyah and Seraphine handed over everything. The accounts, the paper trail, the pattern that had been built for months to make one woman look guilty for a crime she never committed. Ji-ho didn't wait for anyone else to act. He called Do-yoon-baek into his office himself. There was no shouting, no display of power for an audience. Just Ji-ho, sitting across from the man who had known him longer than almost anyone alive, looking at him with something closer to grief than rage. You knew exactly what I'd do, Ji-ho said. You knew I'd try to control every risk around the people I love. You built your whole plan around my worst habit. Baek didn't deny it. Ji-ho didn't destroy him the way the old version of himself might have. He simply ended it, clean and final, and then did something none of his senior executives expected. He restructured the entire organization. No single person would ever again hold the kind of unquestioned authority Baek had used against him. Financial decisions moved through independent oversight. Power stopped living inside one man's trust. For the first time, Ji-ho built something that didn't depend on him controlling every person inside it. Aaliyah watched the changes happen from a distance, and something in her chest loosened, just slightly. Not because he'd fixed everything, because he'd finally understood what needed fixing. Still, the fear didn't disappear overnight. It never does. I'm scared, she admitted to him one evening, sitting on the small balcony of the apartment she'd chosen herself, the one she paid for with her own name on the lease. Not of you, of what it means to love someone like you. I'm scared that one day I'll wake up and the world will have quietly folded me into your wealth again, and I won't even notice it happening. I'm scared too, Ji-ho said, that giving you complete freedom means one day you'll use it to leave. Maybe I will. I know. She looked at him, surprised he didn't flinch from the words. I used to think love meant removing every risk, he said. Now I think it just means being honest about the ones I can't remove. He paused. I don't want easy, Aaliyah. I stopped wanting easy the day I realized easy was just another word for control. Neither fear vanished that night, but neither of them let it make the decision anymore. A month later, a journalist finally asked Aaliyah the question directly, in front of cameras, in the exact kind of room where she'd once been humiliated for existing beside a powerful man. Some people still call you a gold digger, the woman said. What do you say to that? Aaliyah didn't reach for evidence. She didn't mention the empire she'd refused, or the accounts she'd frozen, or the conspiracy that had tried to use her name as a weapon. People assumed I wanted his money, she said, because they couldn't imagine a woman standing beside a powerful man without wanting something from him. I understand why they thought that. I just don't need them to think anything else anymore. Ji-ho stood beside her through the entire answer. He didn't speak for her. He didn't correct her. He simply stood there, present, quiet, letting her voice be the only one that mattered in that room. That image traveled further than any accusation ever had. Aaliyah went back to her design studio not long after, the career she'd nearly given up the night she first walked into his world. She built it slowly, one project at a time, and Ji-ho stayed exactly where he'd learned to stay. Close, but never at the center. Present, but never in control. One evening, months later, she found him on that same balcony, the city lights spread out below them, the way they had been the night everything started to unravel. "What would you have done," she asked, "if I'd taken everything and walked away that day?" "I would have let you." "Would it have broken your heart?" "Yes." She studied him for a long moment, searching his face for the old instinct, the one that always tried to manage her answer before she gave it. It wasn't there. "That's the first answer you've ever given me," she said, "that didn't try to control the ending." She reached over and took his hand. Not because he owned an empire, not because he had saved her from anything, not because she had finally proven, once and for all, that she was never what they said she was. She took his hand because after everything, after the accusations and the fear and the empire neither of them needed, they were finally choosing each other freely, with nothing left to prove and nothing left to control. The city hummed quietly below them, indifferent to the two people standing in the dark, no longer waiting to be believed.